The creation week through the patriarchs will be covered in this third presentation of the timeline. Before adding a year to the creation narrative, it must be established by a biblical account that the 13 cycles of 19 years each was factually God's method of tracking time. What was the Bible event that shows the Metonic cycle to be the structure that God used to mark time? It was the worldwide flood and the record of the time that it lasted. It is through Noah's time log of the flood year that God has preserved his system of measuring time. It is through its compiler Moses that Noah's time log has been preserved, and it is God's way of showing how time is recorded throughout the Bible. This time log begins in the 7th chapter of Genesis, verse 4, and sets the weekly time frame of 7 days of creation. Genesis 7, verse 4 says, "For after 7 more days I will cause it to rain on the earth 40 days and 40 nights, and I will destroy from the face of the earth all living things that I have made." 7 is an important number that wends its way through the entire Bible. Next to the day and the hour, it is the smallest element of time that God uses, and it has been followed by man throughout its history, proving its importance by the fact that we still use it today. Not only is it in use today, but it is factually a replication of the 7 days of creation in an unbroken line of weeks to the present time, which is proven by this work. This makes this 7th day the commemoration of man's beginning and also of his world. That 7th day is now called Saturday. It is important to recognize that there are 2 creating gods, the Father and his Son, Christ. We see this in John 1, 1 through 3. "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. And all things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made." Christ was the Word, the one responsible for recording the Bible. God records the passage of time from the creation of Adam to the beginning of the flood year in Genesis 5, 1 through 32. Note that in Genesis 5:3, God uses the same word likeness and image when Adam was created. Verse 3 of Genesis 5 tells us, "And Adam lived 130 years, and begot a son in his own likeness, after his image, and named him Seth." Seth, the offspring of Adam, looked like him and had a character similar to Adam's, not God's character. Genesis 5:5 says, "So all the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died." For modern man, this length of life appears to be nothing more than a fairy tale. But for the Genesist, it is something that is easily possible. Isn't this what man has been working on? A way to extend life without end? It is known that the aging process is the result of the loss of part of one of the genetic codes of each cell. If this loss could be stopped by man, he would be able to live indefinitely, maintaining all of his youthful characteristics. Rather than confining Genesis 5 to a fairy tale status, true science once again proves the validity of this Bible account. The answer to why our present lives are so much shorter today is revealed in Genesis 6:3. And the Lord said, "My spirit shall not strive with man forever, for he is indeed flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years." Why did God make this change? The answer is given in Genesis 6:5-6. Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was evil continually. And the Lord was sorry that he made man on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. God reduced the lifespan of man so that the rule of the despotic leaders would be shortened by an early death. It is Satan's way to have man be constantly striving with other men to reach the top, which brings all the pain and suffering to this world. Satan's system is the gaining of that top position by any means, to lie, to steal, to kill. It is the way that Satan has led man to think. By employing these violent methods, man is able to maintain rulership over others. By God cutting short man's lifespan, he put a restraint on the depths of depravity that man can sink to. Thus, man has had more than 6,000 years to perfect his government using these methods. But none has ever lasted or brought peace and harmony to this world. It is the constant striving to reach the top by any means, lying, stealing, murder, even setting up false religions, that guarantees the failure of every government that man has devised. Not all Bible chronologists reject Genesis 5. Those using it simply add up the years and come to what they think would be the year of Noah's flood. That would be 1656 AM. And note that AM means years after the creation of man, or the number of cycles of the earth circling the sun. The following chart shows the compiling of the births and deaths of the patriarchs, as found in Genesis 5, 1-32. This calculation can only be true if these men were all born on the same day of the same month as Adam was born. Adam was brought to life on the 6th day of the first month, as the Bible records. Now, let's suppose that Seth was born in the 6th month, when Adam was still 130 years old, meaning that Seth's first child, Enosh, must have been born sometime after the 6th month for Seth to be 105 years at Enosh's birth. It would be correct to conclude the same for the 9 patriarchs who followed Adam. From the timeline given in Genesis 5, it can only be surmised that the minimum number of years from the creation to the flood would be 1,656 years. This is not stated in the Bible, leaving one to either confirm this date by other scriptures or explain the actual date of the flood was. Proverbs 25:2 tells us, It is the glory of God to conceal a matter, but the glory of kings to search out a matter. This is further defined by Paul in 2 Timothy 2:15. Be diligent to present yourselves approved to God, a worker who does not need to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. To rightly divide means to open up that which is hidden. The only correct conclusion to arrive at from reading Genesis 5 is that there could not have been less than 1,656 years from creation to the flood. As demonstrated by the example given by Seth and his son, one can only add time to the 1,656 years. The scriptures of Genesis 5 requires that each of the patriarchs be of a certain age at the birth of their son, meaning that it is the birth date of the son that controls the number of years to the flood. The Bible does not reveal these birth dates. Therefore, there must be another factor that will give us the year of the flood. Not only does Genesis reveal the lengths of the lives of the patriarchs, but points to one as being special to God. Genesis 5:23 and 24. So the days of Enoch were 365 years, and Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Enoch was not the only one who walked with God. This is proved in Genesis 6, verse 9. Noah walked with God. God pointed out these 2 men as special. What is it that made them special? You can find the answer in the article, The Physical Presence of God, which can be found on this very website. It was through the calling of Noah and his family that God made a new start for man on the earth. The next video, number 4, will detail the flood of Noah.